All right, once again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's amazing how those 10 minutes can go quite so fast. Hope everyone was able to stretch those legs, get in some more of that Rocky Mountain fresh air that we've got out there, refill those coffee cups, and get ready for a couple more interesting panels this morning. All right, and joining us for a second time, please welcome Crystal Ball with the Public Power Underground podcast. Appearing on the podcast this morning alongside Crystal will be Emeka Anyanwu and Mark Nelson. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage. Thank you.
I'm going to test this mic. You hear me? Okay, we're going to have a lot of fun. So after this break, we're going to liven it up. We had some pretty heavy topics before. Gentlemen, have a seat. Yeah. So I'm Crystal Ball, and I'm the host of Public Power Underground. I'm also the executive director of a trade association called the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee. And so I was just really great to hear the conversation about collaboration, because really that's what Public Power is all about, Public Power Underground is all about. That's what PNUC is also all about. It is the place where we bring the public power organizations and investor-owned utilities in the Pacific Northwest together to talk about the evolving energy landscape. But we also include industry partners, and Gridliance is an industry partner of PNUC. So pleased to be here. Joining me again is Emeka Anyanwu. Hi, Emeka.
Hi, Crystal.
You get to test your mic a little bit.
I do.
Yes, sounds good.
Sounds okay, I think. Yeah, hopefully everybody can hear me. Yep, I see some thumbs up.
Great. Emeka is the CEO of Lincoln Electric System. I know Emeka from working with him when he worked for Seattle City Light, which is one of the nation's largest community-owned utilities, and he was the Energy Innovation and Resources Officer at Seattle City Light. You were an active member of the Pacific Northwest utility community. Joining Emeka and me is Mark Nelson. Hi, Mark.
Hey, everybody.
Mark Nelson is the founder and managing director of Radiant Energy Group. Mark holds a Master's of Philosophy in Nuclear Engineering from Cambridge University, and you have a consultant to the clean energy industry and environmental organizations around the world. Mark, in one sentence, what is Radiant Energy Group?
At the moment, we mainly solve problems in nuclear energy. For a number of years, it's been stopping closures, and now it's getting nuclear plants built.
That was very succinct. We are recording this very infotaining bonus episode of Public Power Underground in front of a live audience that is gathered here for the third annual Gridliance Transmission Symposium. Emeka and Mark have each written headlines about future news stories for 3 different, very broad energy topics, plus a bonus topic if we have time. Emeka, Mark, and I are going to discuss the topics and takes, but this is a competition. This is where we need audience participation. We have organized these topics into head-to-head matchups, and the audience is going to vote. I will read the headline, and in front of all of you, Emeka and Mark are going to explain their take on the topic and why they think their energy prediction is right. And the audience is going to listen to these explanations and then vote. So you see on your tables some new additions over the break. Staff have placed voting devices at each table. So these are your voting devices. A bell and a bike horn. I already see people testing them. Each table, so this is also collaboration because each table gets 1 vote. And you will get a very short amount of time to work together to determine who to vote for. So if you are convinced that Emeka is right, you will ring the bell. Yes, that's as a table, you will ring the bell. Try it out. Let's see. How loud can we get? That sounds good. Now remember, we're recording a podcast, so it needs to be loud, right? This is auditory. All right, if you like Mark's headline better, then you will use the horn to vote. Okay, so test the horns. Oh, that sounds great. What do you think, Mark?
Crystal, I feel great having the more entertaining and comical sound. So if people can't decide, they'll probably default to using the horn.
Comical, so, like clown opinions is what you're.
Oh. Yep, we got it going. Okay, so the vote, though, should be based not just on which headline best predicts the future, but also who is most convincing, all right? So you got the rules. At the end, though, I will decide which contributor is right and whether the audience was right or wrong, because I'm Crystal Ball, and we're predicting the future. All right, 3 rounds of head-to-head matchups. At the end, there may be time for a bonus. Let's get started. You get it? First headline. Does it go up there? Yes. All right, so this is the competition part. We've got these headlines. Mark Nelson's headline is "Keep Passing That Gas. Trump Bans Natural Gas Bans." And Emeka's headline is "Feds to the Rescue. DOE and FERC team up to deliver paradigm-shifting, expedited transmission siting process." Ooh, that's a mouthful. Emeka first. What's your take on this headline?
Yeah, so as we've already heard a little bit this morning, transmission development is a mouthful. It's a brainful. It's all the things. So I'm sure lots of folks in the room are familiar with the National Transmission Planning Study that was just released, talking about up to 2.6 times the size of the current U.S. transmission grid by 2050, and 3.5 times interregional transmission build by 2050. So, you're talking about accelerating a development path that will have to be massive, and we haven't even begun to talk about the cost of that. But then there's the saving side of that, right? And so I think, what we've already heard this morning, and what, of course, we will continue to hear today and tomorrow, is how much of a challenge that will be, right? And with all of the sort of the logjam and the conversation around cost allocation and sort of, how that's all going to play out, it seems to me that, one of the things that could really sort of make a big difference, right, is sort of maybe taking on that piece of this conversation that is a little less difficult to sort of parse, right? Because what it is really, if we can work out the siting piece of transmission development, that is sort of a no regrets, no really debate. It's certainly true that concepts have come up like federal siting on federal lands, that kind of thing. But I come from a part now in Nebraska, a part of the country where we are seeing an incredibly long transmission siting process across the sandhills of Nebraska, and there are lots of things sort of going on there. I was just in Washington State, where another neighboring utility had a very similar multi-decade siting-related transmission development process, right? So you see these things sort of binding up the process, binding up the transition we need to make. Again, these massive gains we have to make in a couple of decades, and I think were the federal government to find a way to sort of break that logjam through some kind of an expedited siting process, not unlike what they've done with some of the hydro relicensing stuff, I think we could see really big gains. It
would be big news. And we heard earlier this morning about better coordinating resources and transmission planning. And it's a symposium about transmission solutions. So kind of gave you the lead here a little bit, Emeka.
Try to be on brand a little bit, much like my fine apparel.
Paul's gonna love that. Public Power Underground merch. Mark.
Well, so now I'm up here defending something where Crystal, I have to tell you, egged me into the strong version of this headline. I said states ban natural gas bans, and she says,
but they've
which
already
states?
Done that. You gotta go.
And now I'm here to defend this one. I have no clue who's gonna win here in a few weeks. My smartest friend yesterday described it as a moment of maximum entropy. We have absolutely no clue. All sorts of things could be going on below the surface that we won't know, and there could be a landslide one way or another. I can say this. People are having to learn about energy faster than I've ever seen it, in more spaces than I've ever seen it. Now, I'm sure everyone says that about their own energy crisis. I'm sure we heard that in '73 and before. I wasn't around there, but I just trust that there was a lot of education very quickly. What I'm seeing now is the natural gas being hooked up to new buildings is being used as part of tribal battles beyond energy itself. For example, one of the ways, if you think that it's harder to build apartments with natural gas and you don't want any apartments built, you can try to ban or restrict various things and make it more difficult to build it. Some people think that banning natural gas in their city will help build more apartments because it will be easier. We're already seeing initial efforts in states like my home state, Oklahoma, to ban municipal gas bans, which means that this is at the top of the head. It's catchy, it's small, it's meme-sized energy policy. Now, what you'll see in a place like New York is that they tore down Indian Point, which was a third of their electricity and not dependent on natural gas. They built natural gas power plants to make up the difference. They have an extremely congested grid, and then they have not expanded any pipelines, and I don't know of any new LNG facilities that are being built to make up the gap. So instead what they just did, they piled it all into long-tail risk and being full of crap on climate objectives. Like, those two things go extremely well together in cities like New York, let me tell you. So what you then see is then people are aware of natural gas in a way that they're maybe aware of electricity now that when they get electric vehicles. And we're seeing splits that don't correspond to traditional political tribes, and they end up making very confused and interesting politics. My prediction is that if Team Trump wins here in a few weeks, there will be an effort for these easy gains to reassure a probably very nervous fossil fuel sector where Trump has promised the American people to cut the price in half, which I can tell you has people extremely nervous in my home state because they're barely making it at the current price, and Trump has said he'll make energy half the cost. One of the ways to do that is lock in long-term demand. One of the things that he'll be pushed to do from day one is to ban gas bans as a major moral victory that won't really kick in as affecting things for some time.
So 2 predictions in one, but I did push you on that because the first you submitted was state bans. I did that because states have already passed bans that might prohibit cities from doing that, Mark. So I had to make you go a little bit
Okay, it's only
further.
sporting then.
Emeka, any rebuttal?
Only to say that, I mean, again, I think there are obviously lots of attorneys in the room who would know better about this than me, but the constitutionality of that sort of comes to mind. It also, this is a battle that we are all having right now. This is a community full of public power people. We pride ourselves on local control. I think the idea of sort of that kind of state or federal decision making on behalf of our cities seems like it could be a little bit problematic.
Yes. It might make forecasting electrification a little bit easier if there's a ban on.
It certainly will make self-determination by local communities and public power entities more difficult.
Yep. All right. So you've heard the explanation.
Do I get a rebuttal for?
The audience says yes.
Okay, so 2 federal government agencies with the best of intention, with the best people that can be hired at federal government rates, will make a breakthrough through a century of extremely difficult technical and political problems, coupled with physical problems, coupled with supply chain problems. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, time to vote. You get to do this, I'm going to call. All right, if you think Emeka is more convincing, ring the bell. I hear bells. All right, thanks, Jean, out there. This is a table group exercise. All right, if you think Mark's is more convincing, honk the horn.
I feel like those are very loud.
Those horns are very loud. But again, I'm Crystal Ball. I get to decide. I'm going with Emeka because I'm hopeful.
The liberal media strikes again.
I'm hopeful on transmission. competition. Let me just be.
Well, like
clear.
a great philosopher once said, you play to win the game. So, yeah, there you go.
All right, you got another chance though, Mark. Yes. All right, so next headline, the big reveal. Mark's headline is, Big Nuclear is Back. Fleet of standardized large reactors receives green light. And that is competing against Emeka's headline, NARUC and NRI introduces pro forma order 2222 tariff intended to ensure equitable distribution of aggregation benefits. Mark, you're up first.
All right, so the last time we tried to build a lot of large traditional nuclear reactors, we made a bunch of I'm sorry, the time before the recent time, so like, 1970, 1980s, it left such a bad taste in the mouths of, I'm sure, a lot of the institutions represented here, if not the people here, that I think a lot of people were certain it would never happen again. We would never try to build so-called big nuclear. A few things have intervened. One is the fading out and passing away of a generation that emerged culturally in 1968 and dominated the global scene from the 1980s onwards, this sort of international generation of do-gooders who thought that to do well for the Earth, you needed to stop nuclear weapons and you need to stop nuclear energy because it's somehow connected, and you stop it all. That generation is rapidly losing its influence, and I've seen a shocking decline in the last 12 months. What seems to have happened is that the richest companies that have ever existed suddenly realized that they had to have nuclear, and a lot of those companies, their founders, their board of directors, their shareholders are major donors to the environmental groups, and all discovered almost simultaneously what their donations had been used to do, which was block and destroy any chance of nuclear energy coming back when you would think that the climate imperative from the same crowd would demand it. So we have a weird moment where nuclear conversation is back on the table. There's been a lot of discussion of so-called SMRs, small modular reactors. A number of these are very small in power output, but very large in construction costs. A number of these don't exist. Specifically, all of them don't exist. And I am very excited about some of the teams putting some of the proposals on the table, and I hope that their prototypes are reasonably competitive here in a decade. What we have is the world's finest nuclear plant designs. China is stamping them out. Good old-fashioned Westinghouse designs. It's their best one that they have. They bought Westinghouse designs, and they're stamping them out in about 40 to 48 months per 1.2 gigawatt reactor. Now, 12 months ago, we didn't have Vogtle 3 and 4 completed and delivered as a project. Now we do. And suddenly, conversations with the big tech players have turned to fever pitch as they suddenly realize they've rather missed the ball on energy, and all they can do is build out gas fleet and then take a big bruising L in terms of reputation, or they can buy up existing nuclear and go to war against all of us who have been using nuclear for many decades, or they can try to resurrect nuclear, and we have, 3 of those reactors total that can be reasonably resurrected. So we have a moment where the right serious people have suddenly had to learn about electricity for the first time in a generation, along with the passing of the generation that attempted to block, to stamp out, to blackball anybody who brought up nuclear in the fine boardrooms of New York City or San Francisco, those places. We've known nuclear has been good in the heartland. What this means is we have a magic moment where we have no active nuclear projects, depending on your definition, going in America, but we have astonishingly good performance from a design that's being chosen all over the world outside of America that America owns and can develop itself. I strongly suspect you're going to see some extremely interesting things by December 2025, hence the headline.
It's a bold prediction, but I think it's less bold given what we have seen in the past year. Mark, thanks for submitting it. Emeka, your headline.
Yeah, so this obviously is a little bit of a different twist. I think one of the things that seems to me to be very true about some of the conversation that we are in this moment is really thinking about how we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, right? And I think part of what is true, there's a Lawrence Berkeley National Lab study on residential solar adopter income and demographic trends, right? So that's a mouthful, but it's just thinking about who is adopting solar and sort of where is that value accruing. Because when you think about the kind of aggregation that is proposed by Order 2222, you are thinking about sort of the ways in which those assets essentially will be sort of monetized in the marketplace, right? And so therefore value will accrue to the asset owners, and you have to think about who that value will accrue to. So they studied a little over 2 million residential rooftop solar installations, which is about 80+% of all systems in the United States, according to the National Lab. And they found that the median income of adopters was $115,000 a year. That's compared to a US median of $63,000. So think about that, right? Nearly twice the median is what sort of the average, or the median average income of people who are adopting. So what that means is this. As you start to think about aggregation and the potential of getting the value for the aggregation of these kinds of assets in the marketplace, the value, right, sort of the payback for all of that will land in those places. You will exacerbate existing, or you will create new equity issues from an energy equity, energy justice perspective, right? And while that sounds like it is just a sort of a moral or an ethical, kind of a feel-good kind of thing, it has really significant implications in terms of the economics of a transition, right? Because what it means essentially is you will begin to sort of sideline large portions of the population out of this conversation, and that simply won't work for the kind of pace that we are on. And so, you know, we heard, right, Natalie did a great thing sort of here at the top where she acknowledged the holiday today, right? And you think about, again, mistakes of the past and the ways in which some communities have been left out of these conversations for generations, right? Our ability to avoid making some of those mistakes so that we are not doing the things we are having to do now to make up for those mistakes is really, really imperative in this. And so I think, you know, I picked a couple of sort of groups that maybe would have the platform to develop something that would represent a way of ensuring that as you think about how those assets, right, these solar assets or other distributed assets are monetized in the marketplace through aggregation, right? A lot of it, again, also done on a sort of private for-profit basis. You are thinking about the ways in which you will make sure that the value of that accrues to our communities equitably. And again, in a room full of public power people, right, who, you know, we all understand how important it is that our assets, our utilities as an asset, our energy systems as an asset, really be sort of owned and controlled and the value accrued to the community, right? That is the sort of foundational element that public power is built on, right? And so I thought, as you think about the ways in which this is gonna happen, right? My utility, lots of utilities I'm sure in the room are having a lot of these same conversations. And were we to have sort of a standardized way of sort of essentially creating that economic sort of transfer, I think that could be, to me, I think that's the kind of thing that would set a baseline that would make it possible for us to avoid those kinds of mistakes.
Emeka, that's a really good explanation, and I hear you about using that growing number of customer-owned distributed energy resources to really contribute to the solution. Mark, rebuttal?
Well, maybe this isn't a direct rebuttal saying I don't think that'll happen, but in California, they're finally, because of a major crisis with how these benefits were distributed, obviously it's a different system, but they finally reformed solar to be a little bit more fair, and it destroyed the nation's biggest solar industry overnight. How intriguing. In other words, there may be a lot of interest groups that realize that their survival may rely, in the short run at least, I don't know about the long run with there's permitting reform for distributed resources or whatever, if we get better at knowing we won't crash the grid by doing things. I keep seeing instances where an unfair thing is corrected and it stops the unfair practice rather than making it fair for everybody and continuing it. So whether people actually, whether they put this out or not, I think that there will be a lot of unintended effects from actually being fair about spreading physically and engineering constrained resources to lots of people.
It's a good consideration. All right, audience, time to vote.
Do I get to? Oh, come on,
What could there possibly be to object from a big fleet of nuclear reactors?
I don't know. I mean, I think you cited Vogel, right? And I think we all know, right? That was a project delivered on time and on budget, right? Yes, everybody?
You know, we weren't that much
And if
worse
we
than
know
China's
nothing
first.
else here in the United States, is that when in doubt, rely on China for your solution, right? No? Yes? No? I don't know.
I think Mark's point was that China was relying on the U.S. solution, so bring it back to the U.S.
Well, right, but the
They
idea
found that our reactors work better than the ones they developed custom for themselves.
well, and we are relying on, well, for all intents and purposes, their reporting of how wildly successful their development of those resources are, which we know, of course, is not biased at all.
Not biased, no. Okay, audience. If you think that Mark has been more convincing, you know what to do. Horn. Honk that horn.
We've got our nuclear team over here. I like that side of the room.
All right. And
You
if
can't
you
just honk it louder. That's not. That's not how you
it's
win.
already pretty loud, that horn. All right, and you know what to do. If you thought Emeka was convincing, if you believe in Emeka, ring that bell.
Team bellhop.
Oh, there's a lot of ringing the bells there. But again, I'm Crystal Ball, I get to decide. This is a big problem with big companies, and I think Mark is onto something, so I'm gonna pick Mark's headline. Big nuclear is back.
We can't end the best of three in the middle of the thing. So I get it. You're good.
This is why I'm trying to keep us on time so we can get
Get to the bonus.
Yes,
round.
get to the bonus. All right, next up is our third headline. We're going to click that forward. There we go. All right. This is Grid to Nowhere. Demand for transmission hits a snag as big tech demand for unbundled RECs slows. And that is competing against Emeka's headline, First Operational Demonstration for AI Data Center Dispatchable Load Flexibility Unveiled. Emeka first.
Okay, so as has already come up today, right? There's an EPRI study that talks about the scale of data center load and what it's going to be. It's one of the fastest growing industries worldwide. The big three, right? Meta, Amazon, Google, have more than doubled their electricity use since between 2017 and 2021. So, 4 years basically, right? Doubled the energy use. And it's about almost 3 watt hours per ChatGPT request. So one of the things that is going to be true, obviously, is that as these data centers develop, these AI data centers develop, simply meeting the demand the way we've met demand in the past won't do, right? And so thinking of conversations, I have the fortune of course, living in a part of the country where a lot of these are being developed. I think many people probably saw our neighbors to the northeast in the paper recently talking about sort of their efforts to meet some of this demand, my friends from Omaha. So I think what's true is this: as we've had conversations with these developers, we have one in our backyard at LES, is that the efficiency, right, and the EPRI study calls this out, the efficiency, energy efficiency, and demand flexibility of this part of the new infrastructure is going to be critical, right? And I think it's really important to point out that data centers and AI are the new infrastructure, right? It isn't just the idea that they use upload. It is the fact that every facet of our lives in modern society requires, quite frankly, them to exist, right? So there isn't sort of a realistic reality in which you simply deny the development of more data centers until you're ready, right? Because whether you are sort of watching cat videos or you are trying to do financial transactions, right? All of it requires
National security.
Yes, all of it requires. Well, the grid, right? I mean, we are having all these conversations about electrification and how we will meet that load and the ways in which we will coordinate and manage the grid, right? And I think as that problem becomes more complex, this becomes really critical technology. So I think the opportunity, right, as we've been in dialogue with data center developers, for them to really become an asset to the overall discussion is critical, right? So it is certainly the ability for that load flexibility to become dispatchable and to really become an asset to grid management. And there are great opportunities, as Mark described earlier, quite frankly. Many of the deep pockets that are behind data center development also have the ability to bring those deep pockets to helping us solve some of our grid sort of challenges. And of course, there's a really big opportunity in addition to the demand flexibility and the way that is managed. Some of the assets they put in place around sort of their backup energy sources could also be very critical and very important resiliency assets to the grid, to our communities. And so that's the, see, Mark feels so strongly about
coughing.
He feels so strongly about this that he's all choked up.
Yes, definitely.
But I think again, being able to bring these folks with lots of resources and certainly new to the conversation, but lots of resources and lots of know-how into the conversation in a meaningful way, and having them sort of have skin in the game in terms of load flexibility would be a really good accomplishment.
It's the resources and it's the technology.
Yes.
Using that artificial intelligence to really get smart about demand, forecasting, all the things that utilities take a lot of energy to use or to process, and now that AI is possibly going to be able to do it faster and contribute to the solution. So, Mark.
All right, so I've heard some extraordinary conversations already this year from big tech, where I hear people claiming, no, you don't look at those statements from us over a decade. My team internally wrote a white paper 4 quarters ago that claimed that we actually need stable electricity. And I'm just thinking, for a decade, we've had companies where the dominant narrative coming out of them and the dominant price signal for the whole world of energy, utilities, electricity has come from the side that isn't the engineering, it isn't the people who have to deliver power to data centers, it's coming from and I love lawyers, but it's coming from the lawyers, the people who come out of NGOs and enter Google from some role where they are very close in terms of like the power structure, they're very close to the top, and they certify that Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft have been 100% renewable for a decade. Ignore the location of their data centers next to the coal, nuclear, and gas. That is a mere artifact of physics and reality. Really, these companies have been saying we need to expand enormous facilities that do not nearly at all meet our physical or temporal demands, our geographical or temporal demands. That's the direction, and also because it's such a pittance, it's such a small thing for us to pay out of our marketing budget to claim to be using renewables, we will just pay anything and let any project go, and we'll pay for anything, we'll do whatever it takes to make it investable, we'll buy the RECs, we'll put them in our little REC blender, and we'll call it a day. So then they 10x'd their per facility expected demand, and it broke everything. The people on the inside of these companies who are coming from like the engineering and the power side and the electricity and figuring out how physics works side are in the ascendancy, and the people who claim that they were delivering 100% renewables are having a real struggle, and a lot of them are getting shuffled out. What a fascinating situation. I think that there is a lot of transmission that ought to be built. I think there's a lot of transmission that will be built, especially if you traders who voted for his headline at first are right, and they do start making progress towards aligning the stars so that we can build transmission. I think a lot of demand for transmission has been implicitly subsidized by our new biggest energy users knowing nothing about energy and that being a feature rather than a bug of their internal energy thought structure. So, all of that to say, not that I have strong feelings about this as a nuclear guy who was ignored for many years, but going forward in a world where Microsoft is paying a profound strike price to restart a 50-year-old nuclear plant whose twin had a meltdown in the 70s, a profound strike price, a strike price so high that every 2 years, the owner of that nuclear plant should make enough profit after restart costs to have built it in the first place, built the reactor in the first place and inflated 2024 dollars. I'm talking about deals for electricity as long as they're constant and steady like a nuclear plant. So vast that you would think it's 4 times higher than what used to be a year or 2 years ago good enough to build a wind or solar farm. And I'm hearing very weird grunting and groaning and straining noises out of my friends in the wind and solar world because they're trying to look for that thing where they just passed all the risk up to some big entity with unlimited appetite for it, and they're being told, oh, we love the amazing price you got for your wind farm. We'll totally do that. We just need to ensure deliverability, and we need it to this facility over here in this other state. And we're going to see some crazy things happen. And I think that, like I said, a lot of transmission ought to be built. Even in my nuclear crazed brain, I think there's a lot we can and should do with transmission. I think there's a lot of transmission that was supposed to be paid by one pocket as an implicit subsidy for other pockets, and that's going to struggle now that the great demand growth people have discovered the grid exists.
And a different solution, too.
Well, I think their existing solution is to build data centers kind of the way they were and just watch nervously as all of their carbon targets go up in flames. I saw something where they'd slightly remeasured and they just found that they had 8 times higher emissions last year than this year. And that was part of a very quiet mea culpa where they're like, well, technically, if you look at the electricity that we called the gray electricity where we stack the RECs on top, which is, of course, how electricity works, how it's always worked. They've just discovered it this year, and because they're all nervously looking at each other and missing their carbon goals together, there's not like a specific punishment from the sort of the ESG specific crowd, which itself is struggling a little. So a lot of acronyms made me sound like Emeka here, but just kidding.
It's almost like we're a couple of engineers up here.
Yeah. I just think that there's going to be a lot of projects that switch from one thing to another, where we thought we were doing this transmission for a long time, and we actually see that something else has more value once the big off-takers decide that physical deliverability is everything and they're willing to pay almost anything for it.
Yeah, this is, I think, an unlikely prediction as far as, I don't want to taint the audience, I guess, and I will wait before going to the audience and give Emeka a chance. Emeka, what do you think about Mark's headline?
I mean, I think it works as long as you sort of completely ignore the history, right?
The history of 1 gigawatt data centers.
So the reality, of course, does remain, right, that the impact that corporate goals have had on the transformation is undeniable, right? It simply is true that for all of the impugning of RECs as a concept, which I get it, there are very, very valid criticisms of it, you can't deny what the impact that market has had on the economics of renewable development and the renewable adoption, right? And so while certainly I share many of the sort of cynicisms that my partner up here has, I do actually think that, you know, I sat in a forum of some of our largest customers at our utility a few weeks ago, and we asked them a question about what they wanted to know more about from their utility provider. And something like 80 to 85% of the room, again, remember, I'm coming in from Lincoln, Nebraska, right? The home of renewable advocacy, right? That's a joke. But 80 to 85% of the room said they are interested in sustainability, because at the end of the day, what will ultimately start to drive our choices, our business decisions, is we are trying to meet what our customers want from us. And as has always been true in the world of serving customers, customers aren't necessarily always sort of the most practical with their choices. It doesn't give us a free pass to ignore those desires.
Right, and those corporations are also trying to meet what their customers want.
Exactly.
And at the risk of pushing back against the tide, could I take 15 seconds for
Go.
So we're seeing crazy numbers come out of the data center world where they're going to spend, I don't know, let's say, for example, for like a 1 or 2 gigawatt center, they're going to spend 40 to 45 billion on the non-electricity part. And they got to recover that value in 5 to 10 years. I'm hearing noise that they will never turn off and that any flexibility would have to come from, say, price signals being sent to everyone else to turn down so that the data center, or that the data centers will double or triple up their backup systems to be able to be there on their choice on call for the grid occasionally, but not that the data centers will ever stop those 20 billion of chips and a 10 billion facility from doing their calculations.
Well, we don't all get to ignore the fact that part of what those data centers are doing as they are having that impact is helping you watch the latest episode of the Real Housewives of wherever the heck they are now.
I'm not betting against the American consumer.
All right, audience, get ready to vote. Get ready to vote. All right, you know this. If you are convinced that Emeka has the right headline here, ring the bell. Let's go to Mark. If you were, yep, honk your horn if you're for Mark. Wow, I said that was an unlikely headline. Maybe the audience is convincing me. This is a tough one because we have left little time for our bonus episode. I'm going to go with Emeka.
We got to do that pro wrestling thing where we got to smash chairs.
Yeah, smash chairs on each other.
Okay, the bonus round
Yes.
to draw even. That's what. Let's
And we
hit
have
it.
a few seconds to do this, so make your argument really tight. Mark, I'll start with you. America's nuclear winter over. VC summer resumes construction in South Carolina. And then we have Emeka's study shows U.S. supply chain officially nearing pre-pandemic performance benchmarks. Mark?
So with what we saw with 3 Mile Island is Microsoft demanding it back in a hurry as fast as possible and paying a colossal premium for some of the only additionality you can get in the American nuclear system. We run our nuclear better than any place on Earth. We're getting almost every bit of juice out of it. And so Microsoft casts around and says, you got any more of them nuclear plants? We'll pay anything. And they did. So we're going to see about approximately my own crystal ball reading, about $16 billion in electricity transacted from an 800 megawatt unit, one of our smallest and weakest plants, over a middle 20-year period, leaving a fully ready-to-go nuclear plant at the end of that that's 60 years young. So we have this magic thing where anybody who's got a half-built or just recently shut down reactor is being approached by every entity on Earth. And I think we're going to see something fascinating. The biggest black eye in the recent history of American nuclear is the 60 to 70% completed nuclear plant in South Carolina, where there is a sudden radical increase in demand over expected. And it just happens to be this design that's operating really well once you finish it. And it is blinking lights saying, come finish me, to every entity in the land. I think that we're going to have this astounding news by the end of 2025 that we are going to finish what we started in America, and we're going to see a return to a can-do attitude that delivers big things on time.
This was the best energy news. That's very convincing argument. Emeka.
Yeah, while we're at it, bring back whoops, right, Washington friends?
That was 5 reactors of 5 different designs with 5 different teams.
This is really kind of boring and mundane, right, utility stuff. But obviously, whether you're talking about transmission construction or you're talking about solar or wind development, right, the supply chain disruption has had profound impacts on the pace of us meeting the need that we need to meet. And so I think while it certainly would require quite a radical and profound sort of turn of the tide, I think to see the U.S. supply chain begin to return to levels before that disruption, I think would be massively sort of pivotal in terms of the ability for us to do all of the things we need to start to do all the things we need to do in energy. A lot of these benchmarks are 2040, 2050. We know in our business, right, that might as well be tomorrow, right? So the quicker we can get to finding the materials, finding the supplies that we need to start building the things that we need to build, the better off our pace and our progress toward those targets will be.
All right, audience, with a little bit of time left, if you are convinced that Emeka has the right prediction, ring the bell. And then transitioning to that other voting device, if you think Mark has the best prediction for the best energy news of 2025, honk that horn. And I'm just going to say that the first panel really set it up here when Matt said the biggest news this year was that news, you mentioned a 2-3 mile island coming back to life. And so I'm going to go with Mark on this one on best news for best news prediction for 2025. Anyways, let's give Mark and Emeka here a round of applause. You know, there's so much new that has happened in our industry, and I think about when we were gathered here at this symposium last year, and all that has happened this year. You know, really, the future is hard to predict. We have seen this year rising power demand, that new era for AI, and just a massive influx of capital. These are really exciting times to be in our industry. Emeka and Mark, I really appreciate you doing this with me. You have given us a lot to think about. I hope that you feel seen, valued, and appreciated today.
Yes, I'm very proud of my 2-2 victory. I actually have a consolation prize that I brought upstate here in preparation for this. This may be the right one. I have an Atoms for Peace t-shirt for Emeka for when he decides to bring nuclear back to his utility. So here you go. Congratulations, you tried.
Emeka, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I'll have to wear this when I have my conversation with venture capitalists about the ethics of energy. I feel like those folks would know.
I deserved that one.
Yes. Well, to our audience, really, thank you for enthusiastically participating in this special episode of Public Power Underground. We appreciate you, and we appreciate Paul Dockery for creating Public Power Underground. To our listeners, while you aren't seen or heard, you are valued and appreciated. Roll on, enthusiasts, roll on. Public Power Underground for electric utility enthusiasts. Public Power Underground, it's work to watch. Thank you.
Nice.
That was fun.
Yeah.